Good day everyone, my name is Ruth Infentes and today we will be discussing about the Teachers Made Test together with my co-reporters, Miss Kay Sandra Flores and Miss Rica Maribao. What is Teacher Made Test? Teacher Made Test is unwritten or oral assessment that are not commercially produced or standardized. Basically, it reflects on what is taught in class, fit better with the teaching methods they use. Because of teacher-made test, teachers can assess the students' learnings and like how they progress and how they understand the lessons. Testing. Testing refers to any kind of school activity that result in some type of mark or comment being entered in a checklist or grade book or anecdotal record. So, example is oral recitation and making essays. So, the purpose of the teacher in doing these activities is to know the state of the learnings of their students. So, teacher-made tests can consist of a variety of formats, including matching items, fill in the blanks, true or false question, or essays. So, constructing a good teacher-made test is very time-consuming and difficult. Moreover, it is hard to understand why something so essential to learning process has been virtually ignored in teachers' pre-service or in-service training. Teachers have relied commercially made tests for most of their evaluation. It is because the result of the test that they give to the learners serve as their basis on the learnings of the learners. And in order to know, does their objective meet and does their students understand the lesson? Teachers have neglected addressing this aspect of instruction because they are not trained to write effective tests and few administrators officers guidance. One of the problems with the teachers-made tests are their emphasis lower level thinking. This lower level thinking are knowledge, comprehension, and application. In writing an effective test, it is important to consider this lower level thinking to ensure the test that you have write is effective to students. A study conducted by the Cleveland Public Schools Fleming and Chambers 1963, as cited in Stiggins 1985, it was examined over 300 teachers made paper and pencil test. This test is actually traditional students assessment formats such as written test and also a standardized test that are students to use pencils to fill bubbles on scannable answer sheets. Example, true or false, matching multiple choice. This test is to prove that teachers appears the need of the training of this following. First, write ambiguous paper and pencil test items. Of course, teachers must be open in any alternative ideas in writing paper and pencil test. Second, plan and write longer tests. Teacher must have a plan in writing longer tests. They need to think what are the things needs to validate and scope in their testing. They need to think what are the strategies they are going to use in order the longer test effective to learners. Third, measure skills beyond recall or fact. Teacher must have to know the specific skills and measure the skills beyond recall of fact. It is really important to a teacher, especially if she or he writes an effective test. The teachers also found that teachers often overlook quality control factors like establishing written criteria for performance and planning scoring procedures in advance. Wiggers notes that course-specific tests also have glaring weaknesses. It means it is very obvious and easily seems to be noticed. Not only because they are often too level and context heavy, they are rarely designed to be authentic tests for intellectual ability. As with standardized tests, teachers' design finals are usually intended to be quickly read and scored. Clegans, 1989, page 123. Many teachers-made tests emphasize or give importance in verbal linguistic intelligence, and poor readers are at a disadvantage no matter how much content they know. Teacher-made tests are often subject to be questioned because they differ greatly class to class. Their quality is open to debate. Why do we need better teacher-made? Standardized tests occur so frequently that one aggregate score is not very helpful in determining future instructional goals. Teacher-made tests, however, allow teachers to make decisions that keep instruction moving. Teachers can make change immediately to meet the needs of their students. The teachers most likely to rely in assessment provided as the part of instructional materials and assessment. They design and construct themselves and very little on standardized tests or test scores. Stegans, 1965-69. So teachers can make immediately to meet the needs of their students. Sometimes they didn't stick to the instruction from the curriculum. They will still there, but they will change a bit in order to meet the needs of their students. The key to teachers-made test is to make of the assessment not separate from it. Tests should be instructional and ongoing rather than being after the fact to find out what students did not learn. This should be more before the fact to target essential and standards. Popan 199 warned that teachers-made tests should not be instructional afterthoughts. They should be more prepared prior to instructions in order for the teachers to target appropriate instructional activity for students. Assessment instrument prepared prior to instruction for operationalize a teacher's instructional intention. The better you can understand where you're going, the more efficiently you can get there. Teachers also needs to make adjustments in their tests for the various learning styles, multiple intelligences, and learning problems of the students in their classes. It should be impossible to address every student's needs on every test, but efforts should be impossible to construct the test that motivates students to learn, provides choices and more allowance for individual differences. Of course, every student has different multiple intelligence and they have a learning problems on students. So, as a teacher, you have to think or know also the capacity of your students in order for you to have a plan on what are the strategies you are going to use to deal with your students. Multiple intelligences. Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence calls for multiple assessment for the multiple intelligences. An effective teacher-made test should address more than one or two multiple intelligences. Types of learners. First is we have the visual learners. Now here are the signs of the visual learner. First is we have the minds sometimes strays during verbal activities. Second, organize and approach tasks. Third, likes to read. Fourth, usually a good speller. And fifth, memorize by seeing graphics and pictures. And last, find verbal instruction difficult. Second is we have the auditory learners. The signs, talk to self. Second, easily distracted. Third, has difficulty with the written direction. Fourth, memorizes step by step in a sequence. And fifth, enjoys listening activity. Third is we have the kinesthetic learners. First is we have in motion of the time. Second, reading is not a priority. Third, poor speller. Fourth, likes to solve problems but physically walking through them. And fifth, enjoys handling objects. And last, enjoys doing activities. Learning modalities. Teachers needs to construct tests that can be adjusted for students' learning modalities and to make modification for at-risk students. Friendly 1990 defines learning modalities as ways of sensory information to learn. There are 3 of the 5 senses are primarily used in learning, storytelling, and recalling information. Frienders has identified many characteristics of the 3 styles of learning. So this learning modalities is the teacher needs to construct tests that can be adjusted for students' learning. So,
modification for students with special needs with the movement towards inclusive classroom. Teachers need to be able to meet the needs of students with learning disabilities, behavior exceptionalities. In addition, as today's society is a salad bowl of many ethnic groups, teacher-made tests must allow opportunities for students whose first language is not English to succeed. Authentic tests can celebrate diversity by allowing students to wide variety of ways to demonstrate what they know and what they can do. So for many students with disabilities and for many without the key to success in the classroom lies in having appropriate adaptations, accommodation, and modifications made to the instructions and other classroom activities. Modification gives to a child with learning disabilities is to provide preferential settings, provide special lighting or acoustics, provide a space with minimal distractions, administer a test in a small group settings. The following modification can be made to help ensure success all students, especially those with special needs who are most at risk of failing tests. So read instructions orally. So sometimes the teacher give directions to the students, but then are surprised or disappointed that they don't follow them. No names on papers, no titles on compositions, no answer rounded to the nearest tense. The teacher face all these problems to their students, but we can correct some of this behavior by teaching the skills required for students to be able to follow directions. Number 2, rephrase oral instructions if needed. Number 3, ask students to repeat directions to make sure they understand. Number 4, monitor carefully to make sure all students understand direction for the test. So we are taught to read instructions carefully because they can help us understand how to perform certain tests and help us perform them efficiently. So number 5, provide alternative evaluations, oral testing, use of tapes, test given in another room, dictation. Provide a clock so students can monitor themselves. Give examples of each type of questions, which is the oral or written. Number 8, leave enough space for answers. Use a visual demonstration. Use white paper because colored paper is sometimes distracting. Do not crowd or clutter the test. Give choices. Go from concrete to abstract. Do not deduct for spelling or grammar on test. Use some take-home test. Provide manipulative experiences whenever possible. Allow students to use notes and textbooks during some tests, which is the open book test. Allow students are not penalized for poor memory. Include visual like graphic organizers, test, organizer test. Give a specific point value for each group of questions. List criteria for essay questions. Provide immediate feedback of all tests. Allow students to correct mistakes and or to retake tests to improve scores and understand what they didn't understand on the first test. So how can we design better teacher-made tests? So most teachers will not have time rewrite all their tests to conform to the guidelines suggested. It is important to make sure new tests are designed to meet the students' needs and truly reflect learning. We can suggest that we should teach to the authentic test. Students should also be brought into the test making process. Brown in 1989 recommends that teacher draw students into development of test. So reduce or increase length. So make it adaptive using technology, for example. That is make sure it scales to be accessible to students who might be struggling while also challenging students who may have already mastered the material. Use language, for example, more familiar, interesting, amusing, or otherwise more engaging to the students. Guidelines for teacher-made tests. The following guidelines may help in the construction of better teacher-made tests. Number 1. Create the test before beginning the unit. Make sure the test is correlated to course objectives or learning standards and benchmarks. Give clear direction for the section of the best. Arrange the questions from simple to complex. Give point values for each section, that is, true or false. 12 points each. Vary the question types. True or false, fill in the blanks, multiple choices, essay, or matching. Limit to 10 questions per type. Number 7. Group question type together. Type of print clearly. Leave space between question to facilitate easy reading and writing. Number 9. Make sure appropriate reading level is used. So include a variety of visuals, oral, and kinesthetic tests. Make allowance for students with special needs. 5. Students some choices in questions. Vary levels of questions by using the true story intellect verbs to cover gathering processing, and application questions. Number 14, provide a grading scale so students know what score constitute a certain grade. And last, give sufficient time for all students to finish. The teacher should be able to work through the test in one half the time given students.
Good day to each and every one of us. I am Kay Sandra A. Flores, your last reporter for this topic, and I'm going to continue Miss Rika, my co-reporter's report. So I will be starting with the tips for constructing test questions.
Constructing effective tests. One way teachers can construct better teacher made tests is to consider the types of questions that should be included on a test. Obviously, it is important to select test items that will measure whether students have achieved the significant learning objectives, benchmarks, or standards that have been targeted.
As a future educator, we might ask ourselves, though, why is it so important for us to know how to construct test questions? So, we already know that test questions are very important during our evaluation. So, we must critically create it with very fine and smooth test questions. I am going to discuss with you the tips for constructing test questions. So, firstly, the true or false. So, when making a true or false test questions, we might avoid absolute word like all, never, and always. Since we are making true or false test questions, so it should be answerable by true or false and not by but not we should tend to avoid these vogue words like all, never, and always. So number two, make sure items are clearly true or false rather than ambiguous. So when we say ambiguous, it is not clear. So we should only use questions, or we should construct question that is only answerable by true or false and is clear. So number three, limit true or false questions to 10. So when we are making a true, if you have observed in your previous grade, like in the high school grade, if you have noticed, most of the true or false questions are only limited to 1 to 10 questions. It should not go further to 1 to 15 or 1 to 20, because I think it is very long for a true or false question. So, lastly, we should consider asking students to make false questions to encourage higher order thinking skills. So, in making or in constructing true or false question, we should tend to give them false questions so they could it would encourage them to think critically for the answer. If they if their answer is right, could be false, or the answer for this question could be true. So we need to create more false questions than right questions. So now let's move forward to the matching items. So first, in constructing matching items, we should limit less to between 5 and 10 items. So if you have noticed in the elementary modules, if you have noticed there, most of their matching items type of tests are only 1 to 5 items or 1 to 10 items. So it should just we should just limit the list of numbers of the items there. So number two, use homogeneous list. Don't mix names and with dates. So of course, when we say homogeneous, it means same list. So when we say matching, it means same, or it is a matchy type. So for example, in set A, the question should match to the answer with the which is the set B. So yeah. Number three, give clear instructions, write letter, number, and etc. So as if educator, it is our job to give clear instructions to our learners. So they can focus in answering their answer. They can focus in answering their test it is we can give them clear and emphasized instructions so hindi sila magkamali-mali. So lastly, we should give more choices than there are of questions. So of course, since matching items is one of the easiest tests there over in the so we must, for example, in set A we have 10 questions. So in set B, where the choices belongs, we need to give them at least, since we have 10 questions, so we need to give them at least 11 to 12 choices for their answer. Now the multiple choice items. So as a student also, we already know what type of test is a multiple choice item, since this type of test exists in kindergarten and from college, diba? So, the multiple choice items. So, in constructing multiple choice items, we need to state the main idea in the core or stem of the question. So, of course, multiple choice items must present a definite problem that allows to focus on the training outcomes. So, our question, we should construct questions that provides definite problem, and our choices gives the or provides the solution for it. So number two, we need to use reasonable incorrect choices, avoid ridiculous choices. So also in giving choices, so most of the multiple choice items have four choices: A, B, C, and D. So when we are giving choices, it should be reasonable and not ridiculous. It should not be somewhat vogue or ununderstandable. It should be correct or reasonable. So number three, we should make options the same length, nothing very long or very short. So our options should at least probably one word, two words, but it could also be in a form of sentence, but not in a form of paragraph. So include multiple correct answers, A and B, all of the above. So in making multiple choice items, it is allowed to give three multiple choices that is correct or that is related to the answer. Multiple correct answers. So it could be the first choice or the A is correct, is the right answer for the question. Letter B is also correct. Number three is letter C is also correct, and number four, we can say that letter D is all of the above. So it is allowed to give choices like that. And now let's move in discussing how to construct the completion items. So what is completion items? So completion items are types of tests that it has short questions to be answered. So in completion items, learners are required to insert a word or words to complete a sentence or a series of sentences. So it's more of like enumeration, or somewhat like there is a type of sentences where there is a missing word or two that the students should answer it to make it complete. So in constructing completion items, first we need to structure for a brief specific answer to each item. So yeah, it's just small, like just what I said. It should be answerable by word or two. So number two, we need to avoid passages lifted directly from text. Emphasis on memorization. Three, we need to use blanks of equal length. So our answer should be equal to the length of blanks that we put there. For example, there are only two missing words, so our answer should also two words. So for lastly, avoid multiple blanks that sometimes it makes the sentence too confusing. So let's just say, for example, in the sentence, so in the first word there's a blank there. It should be answered by the students. And the next three words na sa na nasa siya blank din ha. So we need to just give sentences that has one or two blanks. It should not be all blanks, so it will only make the sentence vague and ununderstandable and very confusing para sa ato mga students. So, easy items. So, in constructing easy items task, firstly, we need to avoid all encompassing questions. It means discussing because it will give ambiguous. So, we don't need to tell everything that we know about that particular subject. So, we just need to give them the questions, but we should not discuss of what we know about that particular subject. So number 2, we should define criteria for evaluation. Number 3, give point value. And lastly, use some higher order thinking skills like predict or compare and contrast. Then all recall verbs like list and name. So in easy item test, it is allowed or it promotes to use the compare and contrast type of question. So we don't really have to give questions like list the name of this list the name of that. So we are also allowed to give the compare and contrast type of questions. So that's all for tips in constructing the teacher made test. I think class na siya for tips for constructing test questions. So now let's move forward in discussing how can we assess the authentic learning. So when we say authentic learning, so it is a term that used to describe instructional strategies that are used by instructors or used by the educators. So it is designed to connect the subjects to our dear learners of what they are taught in school and university to the real world. So it's like are letting our students reflect and also at the same time learn something so they could connect to their real life situation, so so they can prepare themselves in engaging to the real world. So authentic learning experiences help the students understand the relevance of what they are learning and how they can apply their skills into the professional world. So since we are letting our students reflect and also at the same time learn something, so one of the best example is in authentic learning, one of the best example for letting our students reflect is the essays, the graphic organizers, oral performances, and artistic presentations, because this measures meaningful learning and can all be included on teacher-made tests. I believe that if we are engaging ourselves in some real activities in school, it is more effective. It gives more effective learning than just answering some type of question, because it gives us experiences and lifelong learning. So, because of time constraints, however, many teachers choose to use the objective type of questions. So, objective style questions have highly specific, predetermined answers that requires a short response. So, it is more like just, for example, the objective type of test is the like matching items or the true or false. So yeah, so since it just requires a short response like true or false lang, or it could either we can choose four choices A, B, C, or lastly the D. Yeah. So yeah, so when we are assessing authentic learning, it is more suitable for our learners to have a real learning with a real activity, physical activity that which involves their body, their mind, and their presence, because it will give them a real lifelong learners that they can use from to their future. So, as what I have said earlier, so these are the example of a objective style questions. So we have here multiple choice, number 1, number 2, true or false, number 3, the matching type of test, and number 4, the short response. So I'm not gonna further explain or elaborate this 4, because I already discussed this in when discuss this in the tips for constructing tests. So yeah, have here the objective types of evaluation for a well-developed objective test. So we have here the advantages and disadvantages, or the pros and cons. So firstly, we let me discuss to you the advantages of a well-developed objective test. So firstly, a well-developed objective test can evaluate skills quickly and efficiently, because you don't need to the teachers don't need to critically give students grades, because it matters to their to the how many correct answers they've got. So second, can prevent students from writing around the answers. So unlike writing essays, so many of us essay makers tend to go around with our answers, like our answer goes around circle and circle with same thought. So it prevents students from writing around. Yes. So number three, can prevent students' grades from being influenced by writing skills, spelling, grammar, and neatness. So since we are um, having an objective type of test where it matters is how many correct answers we got. So our grades does not influence by our writing skills, our spelling, or the grammar and the neatness of our project. So number four, can be easy analyzed. Yes. Number five, prevent bias grading by teachers. So for example, no, there's a lot of scenarios where the teacher give low grade to essays to the students because he or she doesn't like the student, so he give her a low grade. So it prevents bias grading from the teacher. So yeah, so can be used from the diagnostic or previous purposes. And lastly, can be given to large number of groups. So let's just say, for example, in evaluation we want to conduct a uh, to 50 students. So it is possible because it is objective type of test. Um, Unlike essays or any not objective type of test, it takes longer. For example, 50 students, and you will give them essay type of question. So it will take longer for you to check their answers. Now let's move to the disadvantages. So number one, it requires mostly recall of facts. So most of the time, it would just give questions that are based on facts, or just gonna recall them. So number two, does not allow students to demonstrate their writing skills. So the students could not develop their writing skills, their the way they put grammar to their sentences. So it does not develop any skills. So number three, it often requires a disproportionate account of reading, which it penalizes poor readers. So it gives poor reading comprehension to our students. So number four, it can be ambiguous and confusing, especially to younger students. Yes. Usually has a specific and predetermined answer. It is like predicted of what the answers might be. So next, can be very time consuming to construct. So if you have remember the tips in constructing objective type of test, where it is time consuming. So promotes guessing, bintot. We are familiar to this because we have done this already times. I have done bintot many times over my high school, even in college. So lastly, is often used for after years, despite differing needs of the students. So objective type of test, for example, 2019 we create a this type of objective type of test. We can still use the test paper in 2020 to the 2021 to more years. So yeah, and it differs from the students learning, even though the students does not really need this, or it does not cater the needs of our learners. We can still use the old type of test that we create in the previous years. Evaluation should be a learning experience for both the students and the teacher. However, objective style testing is frequently ineffective. Why so? It's because the objective style testing does not really measures of how the students learn, or the particular skills that they were learning, but it only measures their ability to study. Because when we say test, for example, like me, I am more prone in, I don't really listen well during discussion, but study hard, or I particularly can read my notes like every night, or I can study so I can answer those given questions from my teacher. So it does not really measures my ability or the things that I have learned in school, but it only measures of how good at studying I am. So yeah, it is objective style testing is ineffective in evaluation.
So, misconceptions about objective tests. So often critics of authentic assessment point out that evaluating products, performances, and portfolios is too subjective because, as you know, authentic assessment refers to like we are letting our students connect to a real life situation where we prepare them to engage into the real world. So it gives a test which is it is too subjective. So the teachers could assign a grade because they like or didn't like a students, or could base the grade upon outside variables like neatness, attendance, or behavior. So in grading a subjective type of test, if the teacher grades it, there's a greater chance for the teacher to be biased about it. So this same critics points to the objective test being fairer or more valid and reliable, since most well-written selected response test items frame challenges that allow for just one best. So objective style of test should be balanced by other authentic assessment answers, or a limited set of acceptable answer. It leads to the objective evaluation of responses as being right or wrong. However, Sigins 1994 warns that when a teacher selected the test items for inclusion in the final test, he or she is making a subjective judgment as to the meaning of the importance of the material to be tested. So, it is stated that all assessment, regardless of their format, it involve judgment as a part of the assessor, so it becomes subjective. Therefore, all assessment reflect the biases of the assessor. So this is how it became the objective to subjective, because as a part of being a teacher or the assessor of the assessment, we give our judgment, so it still could be a little bit biased. So they should examine both the advantages and disadvantages of objective style tests and then determine the role will play in the evaluation. Questioning techniques and three-story intellect verb. So Bianca and Fogarty 1991. I don't really know how to pronounce their names. Sorry for that. So they have created a graphic based on Bloom's taxonomy called the three story intellect to show what verb teachers can use when they ask questions. So first story verb like count, describe, and match asked students to gather or recall information. So this is more of a recalling for informations that the students already knew about. So the second story verb like reason, compare, and analyze. So they tend to ask students to process information. So this is where the role of the assessor is to ask his or her students what they learned about that certain topic. They let the students learn and analyze. And the third story very like to evaluate imagine, and speculate. So the teachers tend to ask the students to apply informations and effective teacher-made tests. So it includes verbs from all three stories of the intellect. So the third story, it's more of reflecting what the learners learn and what they have gained from the lesson. So um, many teachers use this graphic as a guide when they use questions in class and when they create teacher-made tests that encourage higher order thinking skills. So this is a very effective one. So this is the three-story intellect where the how it is like a house, so there is a three stories. So first we have the first story, which is we tend to ask our students what they already knew about the lesson. The second one is we let them learn, and third story is this is where we let them reflect from the lesson. So this is the objective type of test examples. We have here the true or false matching types, the easy test, the three-story intellect verbs review, the Big Ten teachers made test checklist, and the reflected page. So this is all for our report. Thank you for watching and listening. God bless us all. Thank you.